Okay, hello everybody. Less than a minute to go, we'll start. Oh, Stephanie's online. Ted. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, so we're continuing on with our series on the hindrances and the jhana factors. That's a little bit of a different way to approach talking about the jhanas. This talk is based on a passage from the Visuddhimagga that pairs the jhana factors with the hindrances. To enter jhana, one must make the hindrances suppressed or quiescent. That's the 5 nivaranas, and the jhana factors will arise. And the underlying idea is that the jhana factors are actually very natural qualities of the mind that are suppressed by the hindrances. And when the hindrances are not present, the jhana factors will arise naturally, and the mind will naturally gravitate into deeper samadhi. And there's a one-to-one correspondence between the hindrances and the jhana factors. The 5 jhana factors are vitakka vichara, applied and sustained thought, which we've already dealt with. Then piti and sukha, happiness and bliss. And finally ekagata, or one-pointedness. And the hindrances or nivaranas are sloth and torpor, doubt, ill will, restlessness and remorse, and sensual desire. So today we're dealing with the pair of piti and vyapada. Vyapada is the hindrance of ill will, and piti is the jhana factor either as rapture, which is perhaps too strong, and happiness, which is perhaps too weak. You know, it's one of those where it's not quite, doesn't quite have an English equivalent. So let's deal with piti first. Talk about piti. Piti and sukha are another pair. You know that in first and second jhana they both occur. They occur together, and piti is predominant in second jhana, and then piti drops away and is sukha only. Now they're both 2 forms of happiness. Piti is translated as rapture on the basis that it has, along with the feeling of happiness, there is usually a physical correlation. That you feel it in the body as well as, although it's actually technically a mental factor. It has strong physical resonance, and it can take different forms. You'll feel it in the body as either tingles or goosebumps, spine rushes. The more elevated forms of piti are uplifting piti, where you feel like you're levitating. The body feels very light, and the piti that comes in waves. You feel like washed over with the sensation of piti. It's considered coarser than sukha because Piti has this thrilling aspect, so it's not as peaceful. We can consider the correspondence with the Brahma gods. The Brahma gods are a very high state of deities that have their ordinary consciousness is equivalent to being in jhana, and the Brahma gods of the second level, the Abhasara Brahma deities, their radiance is said to flicker like a torch. Now, all these gods are full of light; they're radiant, but the second level ones who have the correspondent, the dominant mental factor of Piti, their radiance flickers like a torch. But the Subhakina deities of the third level, that corresponds to the third jhana, where Piti does not occur, but Sukha is predominant. Their radiance is said to be steady like the full moon. So in our own experience, our own being, Piti has this kind of kinetic quality. It's not as peaceful. It flickers like a torch, whereas Sukha is steady like the light of the moon. And it's definitely pleasant. It's joyous. It's a joyous feeling. You feel energized and joyous. He has a cleansing and healing quality to it. And I'm not sure if it's exactly the same thing, but I think it's very closely related to movements in the body in other traditions, like chi energy or kundalini. The analogy that's used by the Buddha when he's talking about these various factors and states for Piti is like a mountain lake, a lake in the mountains where no rivers flow into it and no rain falls on it, but it's constantly refreshed by an underground spring. So there's this sense of water rushing upwards. This is contrasted to the sukha, which is like a lotus growing in a lake, and it's completely immersed in water. So there's this sense of motion, there's a sense of uprushing. So this reminds one of kundalini from other traditions. There's this energetic movement in the body. The hindrance that holds us back from experiencing Piti is Vyapada, which is a name for ill will. And ill will is a very broad term to cover all kind of negative, aversive mind states. It's the negative form of desire. It's like not wanting. And it can take various forms, from mild irritation to raging anger or cold hatred. These are all degrees of Vyapada. And as long as the mind has a quality of Vyapada present, then Piti cannot arise. You cannot have happiness and ill will arising in the same mind at the same time. They're completely incompatible. So the stronger forms of Vyapada, like anger, are obvious, or should be obvious, that they're how much of a hindrance they are. Anger is always a negative quality. And it's a defilement that doesn't even feel good, so there's absolutely no benefit to succumbing to anger. It doesn't feel good in the moment, and then all it does is harm to your mind stream. But in terms of meditational development, I think we have to be more on the watch for milder forms of Vyapada, like an irritation. Like if you're sitting in meditation and you feel irritated, your seat is too hard, or the room is too cold, or there's a fly buzzing, if you allow your mind to go to any of these and feel irritated, you feel this aversive feeling, may this not be, then you're succumbing to Vyapada, and Piti cannot arise. You're suppressing the arising of Piti. Anything that draws us into the 5 physical senses will prevent the transition into jhana. Now, this is very important for understanding the nature of jhana and understanding what's happening in the mind. Is that jhana is a transition from one level of consciousness to another, from the sense desire level to the level of form, kama bhumi to rupa bhumi. So it's like a phase shift in consciousness. And as long as you're engaged in the 5 senses, you're taking interest in the 5 senses, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's sense desire or irritation at unpleasant objects, then you're engaged in the senses. That kind of anchors you or locks you to that lowest level of consciousness, and you can't make the transition. This is why practice of sense restraint, indriya samvara, is such an important adjunct to meditation, and the keeping of the 8 precepts is an aid to that, to sense restraint. Because these jhana factors are actually very natural states of mind. People tend to think about the jhanas as something very esoteric and difficult and far away, but they're actually very natural states of mind when the mind is not hobbled and held back by the nivaranas. This is expressed mythologically, let's say, in the story in the Aganya about how the human beings came to be on this earth, that originally we were Abhasara Brahma deities that fell to earth and devolved into humans. And in this way of looking at it, then attaining to jhana is not attaining to anything new, but remembering something very old, something very ancient and primordial, part of our psychic heritage. Whether we take that story with literally or not, it has a powerful message that the state of jhana is actually a very natural, primordial state of mind. Primordial, not necessarily in a time linear sense, but as meaning more basic, more innate. And we are caught up in the sense realm, which is much more complicated, much more diverse and variegated, much more confusing, bewildering. And when we can disengage from all of that stuff, the mind the mind naturally goes into this deeper states and experiences the jhana factors and enters into jhana. So piti is a part of that. It's present in first jhana and predominant in second jhana, where the sense impressions are very far away. And Vyapada is that which hinders us from entering into or from experiencing piti. Because this negativity of mind is incompatible with happiness. Piti is also an enlightenment factor, it's a bojjhanga. So this is something also to remember, that happiness is an enlightenment factor and a jhana factor. Well, it's good. It's good to be happy. There's never any spiritual benefit from being sad or miserable, and certainly not from being angry. These are all negative things that hold us down. So I'll stop there and deal with questions. Somebody put in that the transmission is breaking up. I hope that I didn't get any indication. That usually YouTube tells me when there's a problem. So I don't know if other people have experienced that. Someone asked, how can one easily get in and out of jhana? With a great deal of work. It's like the old joke about the kid in New York who goes up to somebody on the street and says, "Excuse me, sir, how do I get to Massey Hall? Practice, son, practice." Says, some monks look like they are in jhana all the time. Is that possible? No, it's not possible. You can't, if you're in jhana, you can't be doing other stuff. Is piti suspension of avijja? No, it does. Avijja is still present. Piti is a suspension of ill will, but there still could be ignorance present. Is the sense of piti experienced in the body a sense desire, tactile touch sense? It's not really a sense desire. Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, you can fall into desiring it. That would be a mistake. But it is a tactile touch sense. You do feel it in the body. And technically, that's not actually piti. That's an associated physical sensation that goes along with piti. But loosely speaking, we talk about piti as being these sensations in the body. Okay, next one. Ajahn, way back in deep meditation session in which I was acknowledging and letting go continuously, I reached a sensation of losing the body, which to me felt like actually dying. It was quite frightening and suddenly made me cling to being and got out of meditation. What was it and how was it appropriately dealt with? Yeah, if you were getting into a deep place of samadhi where you were disengaging from the senses, and that's a good thing. You let yourself be frightened by it, which if it happens again, just go with it, and there's no danger to it. It's not actually going to do you any harm. Very often with these strong experiences in meditation, the first time they arise, the meditator will either get frightened, as you did, or maybe excited and clinging to it. In either case, they lose their samadhi and they fall from that state. And sometimes it just takes repetition. Second or third time it arises, it'll be just like, oh, there's that again, and you just go with it. So there's no need to be frightened of experiences like that. How will be the jhana levels of Sotapanna Thank you. There's not necessarily a strong correspondence between the stages of the Orion path, like Sotapanna and jhana. They're two kind of separate streams, although they do relate to each other. So a Sotapanna would have an easier time in getting into jhana, but it's not necessarily, they wouldn't even necessarily have any mastery of jhana at all. And someone who has attained jhanas would find it easier to do deep vipassana and hopefully become a stream enterer. But it's not, there isn't a one-to-one correspondence. They're like two parallel tracks. How long does the jhana last if someone were to enter into it by practice for the first time? Well, it can happen very quickly and just kind of go in and out. And I think this is way more common than people credit. I think anyone who does a reasonable amount of meditation will probably drop into jhana very briefly now and again and not even really recognize it. That's a lot easier than gaining mastery of jhana, where you can go into jhana and maintain it. That's a much more advanced practice. But I think just touching on jhana and dropping in and out is not so uncommon or even really so difficult. Is there any benefit to say maybe it's just not a good day and just letting it be a bad day? Or would you recommend putting effort in to sort out negative emotions on bad days? Well, what I would say to that is that a very important component of practice is consistency and regularity, like doing it whether it's a good day or a bad day. Just do your meditation, and even if you don't feel like you're making any progress, you're just sitting there and the mind's spinning out, you're at least strengthening your adhitthana parami, your determination, you know. And another thing is that sometimes it's sometimes really hard to judge for yourself at the time, particularly during the meditation, whether it's good or bad. And sometimes if there's a lot of resistance, then that's really when you need to do it, because there could be something that the mind just doesn't want to deal with and you need to deal with it. So I would persevere on the bad days. If you only meditate when you feel inspired or feel good about it, then you're really not going to ever overcome difficulties. I've heard another version, they matching one-to-one between desire, vitakka, ill will, vichara, doubt, unity of mind. It's strange that this matching still makes sense, and so does yours. Well, I'm not aware of the source of that other one. I'm taking this from the Sudhimagga, and it's a pairing that makes intuitive sense to me. So I'm going with it. In a previous talk you gave that was recorded, you used the phrase jhana theory. I am confused as if there is any deeper meaning to it being called a theory, or if that's merely just a choice of words that shouldn't be read in so deep. Yeah, I would. What I mean by saying jhana theory, is as opposed to jhana practice, like the actual experience of jhana and the practice of jhana, as opposed to all the kind of theoretical structure that's been built up in the literature over time, talking about details as we are about jhana factors and nivaranas and so on. The kind of intellectualizing about it after the fact. It doesn't mean that jhana itself is a theory. Jhana is an experience, but a theory in the sense of an intellectual superstructure to explain the experience. Okay, next one. When we hear about monks flying and levitating, are these monks in first or second jhana or having other psychic phenomena? Thank you, Ajahn. Yeah, you hear a lot of these stories in Thailand about monks with supernormal powers. It's a favorite topic of conversation. And there's plenty of stories in the literature, in the Visuddhimagga, and even in the suttas themselves. The abhinyas, or psychic powers, are described as being a result of jhana, that or one can develop various psychic powers by developing particular meditations. For example, the psychic power of walking on water comes from developing jhana based on the earth kasina. So you have a very strong mental nimitta of earth, and as you walk out onto the water, you perceive the water as earth. The water becomes earth for you, and you can walk on it. If you want to think about that in terms of possibility of a scientific explanation, our world that we experience, we're always collapsing the wave function with an observer effect, and the world only exists as a probability field. So the surface of the water has a very high probability of being liquid and soft and unable to walk on it. But if you had a complete mastery of your observer effect, and you were able to observe it as earth in the highly improbable, but nothing is actually off the chart, because it's like a waveform. You can observe it as earth, you can walk on it. But the Buddha also cautioned about the not to get lost in psychic powers, that they're kind of a diversion. They're not necessary for enlightenment, and they can become a hindrance by attachment. Next one. I'm having trouble understanding the difference between parinibbana and annihilation. When a flame, which is really just the formation of multiple elements, come together, extinguishes, the elements simply go their separate ways, and that formation no longer be present. But I don't understand the simile in the case of conscious knowing and feeling formations such as ourselves. What happens to all the information gathered in our countless lifetimes? Yeah, you're certainly not the first person to ask that question. That goes right back to the Buddhist time, that some people would see parinibbana as annihilation, and other people would see it as a kind of immortal existence. But the Buddha said, no, it's neither. You can't really distinguish whether it's existence or non-existence, or both or neither. It's completely beyond our understanding and experience, so there's really not much use talking about it, or we're trying to compare it to something that we know, and this is something we don't know and haven't experienced, and it doesn't really fit the categories of existence or non-existence. And the Buddha also quite specifically denied that he taught annihilation. He said, when he was accused of teaching annihilation, he said, yeah, I do teach annihilation. I teach the annihilation of suffering. Because there were teachers in India who taught an annihilationist doctrine. The Buddha was not one of them. How can we feel we are in a state of jhana? Well, it's subjective. If you feel entirely at ease and at peace, and the mind is not wandering at all, it's solid on the object of meditation, and you feel this uprising happiness, then you could probably count that as being in jhana. Once while doing breath meditation, I suddenly felt extreme upwelling of joy. Was this probably jhana? I immediately felt I needed to share this and started doing metta. This was a mistake. That seemed to end the experience. Yeah, that's not. That's not unusual. Um, it may or may not have been jhana. It was probably the jhana factor of piti, which um, unless it's all the other jhana factors are present, we can't really count it as jhana. It could have been jhana, but then when you immediately thought you need to share this and you changed your meditation object, then you lost it. That will happen. When you feel something like that, just go with it. Just try not to become either overly excited or, as the previous one of the previous questions, don't become frightened, and certainly don't change your object. Just kind of sit in that state. Next question. Seems that jhana is something I realize after. When I become aware of it during meditation, it evaporates. Yeah, that's actually a reasonable comment. That if you are in meditation and you're diagnosing yourself as being in jhana, then you're applying the kind of intellectual categorizing onto it. That will uh, very likely drop you out of that state. Certainly would in second jhana, where there shouldn't be any mental activity at all, any thinking activity, let's say. Are all psychic powers a mental state? Well, they originate in the mind, but are they are said to have uh, actual, real physical effects. They're not an illusion in that sense. Okay. If one dies in a jhana state, would that make it likely to be reborn in corresponding Brahma Vihara? Yeah, certainly. One would, if one has a mastery of jhana, that's a prerequisite for rebirth in the Brahma worlds. And if your last moments before you die are in jhana, that would pretty much determine that you'll be reborn as a Brahma. Okay, let's see if there's still only just over half an hour, so let's see if there's any more questions. I'll stay on if there's a question or two, but it looks like it may be petering out. I'll just say at this time that next week we're dealing with sukha, bliss, which is opposed to uducha kakucha, restlessness and remorse, which has also been translated as worry and flurry. I think the translator trying to imitate the rhyming quality of the Pali. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up. I'm getting the sadhus coming up now, so thank you all for coming, and we'll begin doing this again next week, same time.